Hello and welcome to WashingtonExec's video series. I'm your host, Amanda Ziadeh, and with me today is Andrew Fairbanks. He's the General Manager of IBM's U.S. Federal Services. Thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Andrew, you've been with IBM for more than 20 years working in the federal marketplace. And recently in your role, you've seen several shifts in government contracting in terms of how COVID-19 has been impacting the U.S. There's been teleworking, mission reprioritizations, and a need to leverage virtual work technologies. So we've been experiencing these impacts, obviously, for months now. I wanted to ask, how the pandemic's currently impacting the federal services space now, after months of being in this situation, and how you've seen these impacts evolve since the pandemic began.
Sure. I think as I think about it, I've seen three major shifts in the market. I think the first that happened right out of the gate was this massive shift to work from home. For many clients, the norm was having people come in and work on government site and deliver value side by side. I think the pandemic forced all of us to adapt very, very quickly and to move a lot of that work to work from home. And I think many clients have actually been really pleasantly surprised by the amount of work and the quality of work that they've been able to perform using that model. And I think it's going to fundamentally transform the way in which services are delivered in the federal market space for years to come. I think the second pivot we saw was really in the prioritization of the missions. Right? Many of our federal agencies are directly impacted because of the roles they play in looking to find a vaccine, to treat the citizens who are adversely impacted, to provide the economic resources that communities need to retain their stability as we all go through the pandemic. And so, whether it's the NIH, whether it's the FDA, whether it's the CDC, FEMA, all agencies are out there on the front lines, have just had to completely reprioritize their efforts and focus on the crisis of today. I think you've also seen a number of other agencies like the Small Business Administration and the IRS and others that you wouldn't think of as normally on the front lines of fighting the pandemic also have to get involved in shifting their missions to provide emergency benefits and other kinds of programs out to the states and out to the individuals who live in those communities. And then the third major change that I'm starting to see agencies pivot to is that as they reflect on the last 8 months, many of them have realized that the applications and infrastructure and the technology that they run on just wasn't agile enough to be able to make the changes as quickly as they needed to perform their mission. So what I think you see agencies doing now is taking on a bit more of a longer term perspective in terms of how do they end up transforming their overall technology foundation and their business processes to enable them to move much more quickly and effectively, if future emergencies present themselves.
So how have you and your team been responding and adapting to the continuous challenges during the pandemic in terms of the changes you just mentioned, increased workforce and mission reprioritizations?
Yeah, I think it's been an incredibly challenging 8 months. It's because it's not only the challenges that we're all facing with the pandemic, but in the wake of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I think we're also going through sort of this massive discussion internally around racial injustice and how we drive more diversity and inclusion into our organizations and how we address these issues on a societal level. So the confluence of those two challenges happening all at once while we're all working remotely it's been the greatest leadership challenge that I've had in my career, I know. But in a strange way, I think it's actually brought our teams together in a really interesting way. I think we've really united around the mission of really making an impact for our clients, for the citizens that our clients serve, for IBM, and frankly, for the world. I think the missions that we're taking on right now in terms of how we get this country through the pandemic and how we as a society respond to these really very profound questions that lie at the heart of what it means to be in a diverse and inclusive society. I've really been extraordinarily impressed by how our team has stepped up to embrace those challenges and to really try to make a meaningful difference in the world. So as challenging as it's been to try to grapple with all of this, in some ways I'm more energized and heartened than I think I've ever been in my career, because I think we really do, when we pull together like that, we're really capable of doing extraordinary things.
Absolutely. And so how is IBM's U.S. Federal Services team supporting its federal clients at this time externally? And where are their priorities and how have they shifted?
I mentioned earlier that I think about the response to the COVID pandemic in two ways. The first is how are we helping our clients with the very tactical challenges that they're facing and just getting through the crisis, right? And so the work we're doing with the FDA, for example, is sort of having a meaningful impact in terms of trying to accelerate the testing and hopefully the finding of a safe and reliable vaccine, and then helping to get that out to market in a safe and rapid way, to really help our society get back to some degree of normalcy. Right. When you think about it, there's also important missions that the National Guard, that the Army, other clients of ours also play on those really important missions. And so we're really working with them to try to make sure they have the data they need to make informed decisions, that they have the applications that they can use to sort of manage those complex enterprises, and that they have the logistics and the operational models needed to actually perform. So, many of our clients in this space, whether it is the Army or the Joint AI Center or the Center for Disease Control or the National Institute of Health or the FDA, we're helping all of those agencies, I think, within their scope of their mission in terms of that tactical fight against COVID. But we're also addressing that longer term issue that I mentioned in your first question around how do we help organizations create the technology infrastructure that they need to operate in a mobile world, but also to make sure that they have the organizational flexibility and agility to be responsive as future crises emerge. And so we're now, I think, once we have sort of stabilized after this first wave, we're now starting to help clients with that planning and the execution of that technology transformation to position themselves for success later on.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing this insights with me. We'll be sure to catch up with you as I'm sure the situation unfolds in the future. So I appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it.